When I first started this journey, I never thought it would lead me to the life I have today. The story I'm about to share with you isn't just about how art made me wealthy. It's about how it saved me. Sometimes life takes you to places you didn't expect. We're going to learn about struggle, loss, heartache, and most importantly, how one can find beauty in the midst of darkness. You'll witness the hidden secrets of the world of art, secrets that have the power to turn everything around. I was just like anyone else, barely getting by in a world that didn't seem to care. I spent my days working a 9-to-5 job that drained me, barely making enough to pay rent and buy food. I had dreams, yes, big dreams, but they seemed far away. Life, however, had a different plan. The turning point came unexpectedly, and it was in the form of a painting. I was at the lowest point of my life when I picked up a paintbrush. My world had crumbled in ways I didn't think possible. The loss of my mother was the hardest thing I'd ever faced. She had always been my biggest supporter, the one person who believed in me when no one else did. Her passing left a hole in my heart, one so deep that nothing could fill it. I remember going to her funeral, standing there in silence, trying to make sense of everything. I wished I had said more to her, that I had shared the dreams I held close to my heart. There were so many words left unspoken. As I looked at the people around me, I realized that I had lost someone irreplaceable. The pain from that day still lingers, but what came from it was something I never expected. Art. I didn't start painting to become rich. I started painting because it was the only way I could pour out the grief, the guilt, the loneliness I felt. I had to find a way to make sense of the world after losing my mother. There were days when I would just sit in my room with a canvas in front of me, unsure of what to do next. But slowly, as I began to fill that canvas with color, something began to change within me. The brushstrokes became my language. My sadness became my muse. And for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. At first, no one cared. I was just another artist struggling to make a name. My paintings were simple, full of emotion, but lacking in technical skill. I remember one particular day when I poured my heart into a piece, only for it to be rejected. The pain of that failure cut deep, but it taught me something important. Failure doesn't define me. It's only through failure that we grow. It was the first of many disappointments, but it also pushed me to improve. I spent days and nights working on my craft, learning, experimenting, and pushing my limits. But the real breakthrough came in the form of a gallery show. It wasn't much, just a small local exhibition, but it felt like everything. I still remember the moment when someone walked up to one of my paintings and said, "I see your soul in this." It was as if they had unlocked a secret that only I knew. And from that day on, people started noticing. My work began to gain attention, and before I knew it, I was getting commissions, invitations to exhibitions, and offers to sell my art. Despite all of this newfound success, there was still a part of me that felt empty. I had gained financial success, but I was losing something else. Love. I had been in a relationship with someone I thought would be by my side forever. But the demands of my career began to pull me away, and we grew distant. One night, I found myself alone, sitting in my studio with a bottle of wine and an empty heart. The person I loved was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Heartbreak is a powerful thing. It strips away everything, leaving you raw and vulnerable. But as painful as it was, it also gave me the courage to do something I had been afraid of for years. Let go. I realized that I had been holding on to a love that was no longer meant to be. And sometimes, letting go is the only way forward. That was the hardest lesson I ever learned, but it was also the one that opened up new possibilities for me. I poured that pain into my art, and it became some of the most powerful work I've ever created. As my career blossomed, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had lost. I thought about my mother, my broken relationship, and the countless times I had failed. But with every piece of art I created, I realized that healing was possible. Art had not only brought me financial success, but had also given me a way to heal the wounds of my past. Every stroke of the brush felt like forgiveness, every canvas a reminder that I was not defined by my past mistakes. One of the most difficult moments came when I realized that despite all of my success, I was still alone. I had built a life for myself, but it was a life without the people I loved most. I had sacrificed relationships, friendships, and even a sense of belonging in pursuit of my dreams. I had spent so much time chasing success that I forgot to nurture the things that truly mattered. But life, in its beautiful irony, gave me another chance. A few years later, I received a call from my estranged father. We hadn't spoken in years. He was struggling with his health and wanted to reconnect. I went to see him, not knowing what to expect, but I knew I had to face my past if I wanted to move forward. That day, I learned the true meaning of forgiveness. We talked for hours, shared stories of my mother, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. It was a bittersweet reunion, one filled with both healing and pain, but it was exactly what I needed. I now stand here today, a person transformed. My journey has been anything but easy. I've faced loss, heartbreak, and failure. But I've also learned that success doesn't come from wealth alone. True success is found in healing, in forgiveness, and in the ability to rise from the ashes of your past. Art gave me the means to escape the prison I had created for myself. It gave me the freedom to be who I am, to tell my story, and to find beauty in the brokenness. And as I look back on everything I've achieved, everything I've lost, I realize that none of it would have been possible without the lessons I learned along the way. Art didn't just take me from broke to rich. It took me from broken to whole. So, if you find yourself in a dark place, unsure of how to move forward, Remember that there's always a way out. Sometimes it's through the things we least expect, like art, that we find our salvation. And when you do find your way, hold on to it, because it might just be the key to turning everything around. As time passed, my life began to stabilize. I had reached a place where I could afford the luxury of slowing down and truly appreciating the path I had walked. I wasn't the same person who had been buried under the weight of grief and failure. I had evolved into someone who understood the value of patience, of hard work, and, most importantly, the importance of connection. But there were still scars, memories that haunted me when I least expected them. One of those memories came flooding back on the day I sold my first large painting. It was a moment of triumph, the kind that you only dream about when you're starting out. A wealthy collector had walked into my gallery, eyes lighting up at the sight of my work, and purchased one of my pieces for a sum that seemed unimaginable to the young artist I once was. I should have felt pure joy, but instead, I felt a pang of loss. I remembered the conversations I had once had with my mother about the dreams we shared, the plans she had made for me. She had always believed in me, even when I couldn't see it for myself. I stood alone in my studio that night, staring at the empty space where the painting had been. The silence was overwhelming. The world outside was moving on, and I had moved with it. But I realized something. No amount of money could bring back the people I had lost. My success felt bittersweet in the quiet of that moment. I couldn't help but cry, not for what I had achieved, but for what I had lost along the way. As I wiped away the tears, I realized something profound. The success I had achieved, the riches I had gained, were not the true measure of my journey. The lessons I had learned, the growth I had undergone, those were the treasures I would carry with me. Art had saved me, but it also taught me to never forget the people who had helped me along the way. It reminded me that, in the end, we are all shaped by the connections we make, by the people who come into our lives, who leave their marks on us, whether they are here for a moment or a lifetime. In the months that followed, I reached out to old friends, to family I had once distanced myself from, and began to rebuild the relationships that mattered most. I realized that no amount of money or success could replace the love and support of the people who had been with me through thick and thin. That was the greatest gift I could give myself, the chance to heal and reconnect with those who had stood by me, even when I didn't deserve it. It wasn't easy. There were times when I doubted my ability to forgive, when I wondered if the wounds of the past were too deep to heal. But just as I had poured my emotions into my art, I began to pour them into my relationships. I made mistakes along the way, hurt people I loved, but with each step, I learned to be more patient, more understanding, and more willing to accept both my flaws and theirs. There was one particular moment that stands out, one that still brings tears to my eyes. It was during a quiet evening, sitting in my childhood home, the same home where I had once felt lost and isolated. My father, who had been a distant figure in my life, sat beside me, both of us sipping coffee in comfortable silence. For the first time in years, we didn't have to say anything. The air was filled with understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we had been through. In that moment, I knew we had both forgiven each other. And then there was the day I returned to the small town where I had first started painting, the place that had witnessed my transformation. I walked through the streets, feeling a sense of nostalgia and longing. It was a place I had once left in search of something bigger, something more. But now I realized it was the place that had shaped me into who I had become. The people, the experiences, the heartbreak. It all led me here. I met an old friend. That day, someone I hadn't seen in years. We sat together and talked about the past, laughed about the mistakes we had made, and shared stories of how life had changed. It was a moment of reflection, of realizing just how far we had both come. I couldn't help but feel grateful for that friendship, for the fact that even though life had pulled us in different directions, we had found our way back to each other. As I stand here today, looking at everything I've accomplished, I know that my story is not one of luck or chance. It's a story of resilience, of overcoming the odds, and of finding beauty in the brokenness. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. Art didn't just take me from broke to rich. It took me from broken to whole. And that, in the end, is the most valuable thing I could have ever gained. So, if you're reading this and feeling lost, remember this. The journey may be long, and the road may be hard, but there is always a way forward. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Keep pushing, keep creating, keep believing. Art, or whatever your passion is, can be the thing that saves you. And even when the world feels like it's crumbling around you, remember that sometimes it's in the pieces that you rebuild the most beautiful parts of yourself. And in those quiet moments of reflection, when you finally find peace with your past, you'll see that the true richness in life isn't found in the things we acquire, but in the love we give and the lives we touch.